On Christmas morning, Mom called and said, "We've set a special table for your brother's kids. Yours might be too disruptive." Dad added, "It's probably best if you skip this year." I didn't argue. I just said, "Understood," and stayed home. By noon, my phone was blowing up, 31 missed calls, a video chat, and a voicemail. I listened to it twice. At 0:47, Dad said something that made me cover my mouth and sit in stunned silence. You know, there are some moments in life that just punch you right in the gut and reshape your entire world. For me, it was a simple phone call on Christmas morning, a moment that felt like a devastating rejection, but secretly, it was the exact catalyst my family desperately needed. My mom called, her voice tight with that familiar, saccharine sweetness she reserved for delivering bad news. "Hilton," she began, "we've set a special table for your brother's kids in the dining room, but, well, yours might be a little too disruptive for that setting." Before I could even process the sting, my dad's gruff voice cut in. "It's probably best if you don't come this year." I didn't argue. I didn't rage. I just numbly said, "Understood," and hung up. But by noon, my phone was absolutely blowing up. 31 missed calls, a video chat, and a voicemail that I played twice. And at 47 seconds in, my dad said something that made me cover my mouth, sit there in stunned silence, and realize this Christmas would change everything about my family, forever. See, I've always been the family disappointment, at least in my parents' eyes. It's not because I'm failing at life. I have a great job as a marketing director at a tech firm in Portland, a beautiful wife, Jessica, who's an incredible third-grade teacher, and our twin 7-year-old boys, Tyler and Logan, who are just the light of our lives. My crime was having children who didn't fit my parents' incredibly rigid definition of well-behaved. My older brother, Garrett, on the other hand, he could do no wrong. He's 3 years older than me, married his college sweetheart, Melissa, and they have 3, what my parents lovingly referred to as perfect children: Jack, 12, Emma, 9, and Ben, 6, all straight-A students, involved in all the right extracurriculars, and possessing that magical ability to sit perfectly still, silent as statues, during long family dinners at my parents' house in Seattle. My boys, Tyler and Logan, were diagnosed with ADHD when they were 5. They are brilliant, creative, and the most loving kids you'll ever meet. But yeah, they struggle with impulse control and sitting still for extended periods. Jessica and I have built our lives around providing them with the structure and support they need. We're talking therapy, specialized education approaches, consistent routines. We've read every book, attended every workshop, consulted with every specialist. Their doctors say we're doing everything right. But to my parents, we were just making excuses for bad parenting. Last Christmas was nearly unbearable. My mother spent the entire day making these cutting remarks. "Look how nicely Emma sits through dinner. Perhaps the boys could learn from her example." As if ADHD was some kind of optional behavior my children could just decide not to have if they watched their cousins closely enough. The worst part was watching Tyler and Logan try so incredibly hard to please their grandparents. They colored quietly for almost 20 minutes before their little bodies just had to move. When they finally got up, my father sighed dramatically, loud enough for everyone to hear. "In my day," he huffed, "children knew how to behave at holiday gatherings." What he didn't see, what he never saw, was Tyler's hands shaking from the effort of restraining himself, or Logan biting the inside of his cheek so hard it bled, just to keep still. "Your brother never had these problems with his kids," Mom said while washing dishes, as if Garrett had somehow made superior parenting choices rather than simply having neurotypical children. The comparison was constant, and it was crushing. Garrett's kids received lavish gifts, expensive electronics, top-tier sports equipment, gift cards with eye-popping amounts. My boys, they'd get educational toys that were almost always inappropriate for their interests or developmental level. Last year, Mom gave them complicated model kits that required sitting still for hours, something she knew they struggled with. "Maybe this will help them learn patience," she'd said with that tight, knowing smile. The boys thanked her politely, but those kits? They were never even opened. In the car ride home that night, Jessica squeezed my hand so hard her knuckles went white. "We can't keep doing this to them, Hilton," she whispered. "They know they're being judged. They know they're being found wanting." That night, I found Logan crying in his bed. "Grandma doesn't like us, does she?" he asked, his little voice cracking. 7 years old, and already aware of conditional love. That broke something inside me. I'd been hoping things would be different this year. For one thing, the boys had made tremendous progress. Their therapy was working. Their new medication dosage was helping with focus without dampening their wonderful, creative spirits. Their teacher had even called us in for a conference specifically to tell us how impressed she was with their growth. And for another, I had news I was excited to share. After 5 years of hard work and 2 missed promotions, I'd finally been named Senior Director of Marketing. It came with a substantial raise that would allow us to enroll the boys in a specialized summer program they'd been dreaming about. The promotion had just been announced yesterday, and I was so looking forward to sharing some positive news with my family. Jessica and I had spent weeks preparing the boys for this Christmas visit. We practiced taking breaks when feeling overwhelmed, using their noise-canceling headphones when things got too loud, bringing their tactile toys for when they needed to fidget. We'd wrapped thoughtful gifts for everyone, including handmade cards the boys had created in their therapy sessions, practicing emotional expression through art. We were ready. We were trying so hard. And then, the phone call that changed everything. It came at 7:15 that Christmas morning. The boys were still asleep, exhausted from the excitement of Christmas Eve. Jessica was in the kitchen making her special cinnamon roll pancakes, a sacred Christmas tradition in our little family. I was setting up the video camera, ready to capture the boys' reactions when they came downstairs and saw their presents. When I answered the phone, I expected holiday greetings, maybe some coordination about arrival times. We were supposed to be at my parents' house by 11:30 for lunch, followed by present opening and dinner later. The 3-hour drive meant we'd need to leave by 8:30. "Hilton." Mom's voice had that particular tone, the one she used when she was trying to sound reasonable while saying something utterly unreasonable. "Your father and I have been talking, and we think it might be best if you come a bit later than planned." "Later?" I asked, checking the time. "We were going to leave in about an hour." "Well, that's just it. We've set a special table for Garrett's children in the dining room, but yours might be too disruptive for that setting. We thought perhaps you could come after lunch, maybe around 3. The meaning was crystal clear. The perfect grandchildren would get the proper Christmas experience. My children would be excluded from the main event. Before I could even respond, I heard my father's voice in the background. Then he was on the phone. "Actually, son, it's probably best if you don't come this year. Melissa's parents are here, too, and there are just too many people. The boys would be overwhelmed." The pretense of concern for my children's comfort was insulting. This wasn't about protecting Tyler and Logan from overstimulation. This was about protecting everyone else from having to accommodate them. I could have argued. I could have reminded them that the boys had been doing so much better, that we had strategies for helping them handle complex social situations. I could have raged about the unfairness of excluding their own grandchildren from Christmas. But I was just so tired. So tired of fighting this battle every holiday, every birthday, every family gathering. Tired of seeing the hurt in my children's eyes when they inevitably failed to meet impossible standards. "Understood," I said, my voice flat, devoid of any emotion. "Merry Christmas." I hung up before they could respond. Jessica knew from my face that something was terribly wrong. She put down the spatula and came to me, pancake batter still on her fingers. "What happened?" When I told her, her face flushed with pure anger. "They did what?" "On Christmas morning, they waited until we were about to leave to uninvite us." She paced the kitchen, furious in a way I couldn't be. I just felt numb, resigned. This had been coming for years. Part of me had been expecting it. "We're not going to tell the boys," I said firmly. "They've been looking forward to Christmas. We're going to have our own celebration right here. They don't need to know." Jessica stopped pacing. "Hilton, you know I support you, but this has to be the last straw. Your parents can't treat our children like this. They can't treat you like this." I nodded. She was right. Something had to change. But today wasn't the day to figure out what that change would look like. Today was for protecting our sons from the crushing knowledge that their grandparents had deemed them too broken to even deserve Christmas dinner. When Tyler and Logan thundered down the stairs 20 minutes later, we were ready with forced smiles and enthusiastic cheer. We had a wonderful morning opening presents. The boys were thrilled with the robot building kits and art supplies we'd chosen based on their current passions. Jessica had even found vintage comic books featuring their favorite superheroes. Around 10 o'clock, Logan asked, "When are we going to Grandma and Grandpa's house?" I exchanged a quick look with Jessica. "Actually, guys, there's been a change of plans. Grandma and Grandpa have too many guests this year, so we're going to have our own special Christmas right here." Tyler's face fell. "But what about our cards? We made them special, and I wanted to show Grandpa my new dinosaur facts." Logan added, "We can video call them later," Jessica said quickly, "and you can save the cards for when we see them next." The boys accepted this with only mild disappointment, quickly distracted by their new toys. But I saw Jessica wiping away tears in the kitchen, and I felt a heavy knot forming in my throat. Throughout the morning, my phone buzzed with texts. My cousin Amy had posted photos of the gathering at my parents' house. The dining room table was set elaborately, with my brother's family in places of honor. I noticed a space conspicuously empty where we should have been. One photo showed mountains of presents under the tree, including enormous boxes tagged for Jack, Emma, and Ben. I recognized my mother's handwriting on the tags. The gifts were easily 3 times the size of what she'd sent for Tyler and Logan, which had arrived by mail the week before. Practical clothes and educational books they had little interest in. Then Amy posted a photo that made my stomach absolutely churn. The handmade Christmas cards my boys had created, the ones we'd mailed weeks ago, were visible on a side table, still sealed in their envelopes. They hadn't even been opened. Just before noon, my phone started buzzing continuously. First my mother, then my father, then Garrett, then Amy, then my Aunt Susan. Over and over, call after call. I silenced the phone and put it away. Whatever crisis had emerged at the family Christmas, I wasn't going to let it intrude on the peaceful day we were creating at home. "Aren't you going to answer?" Jessica asked when my phone vibrated for the 20th time. "No," I said firmly. "Not today." But after 31 missed calls, a video chat attempt, and a voicemail notification, even Jessica was curious. "It might be important," she urged. I hesitated, then played the voicemail on speaker while the boys were upstairs playing with their new toys. "Hilton, it's Dad." His voice sounded strained, almost panicked. "You need to call us back right away. There's been a situation here. And, well, we need to talk. It's about Jack." Then, at exactly 47 seconds into the message, my father said something that made me cover my mouth and sit there in silence. "We've been wrong about the boys all along. Hilton, you and Jessica were right about structure and consequences. We should have listened. Please call back, please." I replayed the voicemail 3 times, focusing on those words at the 47-second mark. My father's voice had cracked as he'd said them, something I'd never heard before. Frank Walker didn't do emotional vulnerability. He was a retired civil engineer who approached life with the same precision and logic he'd once applied to building bridges. Hearing his composure slip was almost as shocking as the words themselves. "What do you think happened?" Jessica asked, her previous anger now tinged with concern. "I don't know. Something with Jack." Jack was Garrett's oldest, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. He was my mother's favorite, a fact she didn't even try to hide. Whatever had happened must have been serious to elicit that kind of admission from my father. Another voicemail notification popped up, this one from Aunt Susan, my mother's sister. Susan had always been the most reasonable member of the extended family. While she never openly contradicted my parents about their treatment of the twins, she'd occasionally shoot me sympathetic looks or find quiet moments to tell me what great kids Tyler and Logan were. Her message was brief but revealing. "Hilton, you need to know what's happening here. Jack was caught stealing Christmas cash from everyone's wallets and purses. Multiple people, including Uncle Pete. It's not the first time, apparently. Call me." Jessica's eyes widened. "Stealing? Perfect Jack." I felt no satisfaction at this revelation, only sadness for Jack and confusion about why I was suddenly being bombarded with calls. A text came through from Amy. "Total chaos here. Garrett blaming your absence for ruining Christmas instead of dealing with Jack. Aunt Susan going off on your parents about the hypocrisy. Wish you could see this." The picture was becoming clearer. Apparently, my brother's perfect son had been caught stealing, and somehow this had led to my family's long-standing double standard being exposed. I called Aunt Susan back, stepping onto the back porch for privacy. She answered immediately. "Finally, Hilton, this is a complete disaster. Your parents uninvited you, and then Jack gets caught with $200 from various wallets and purses. When confronted, he admitted he's been doing this for months, at family gatherings, at school, everywhere. What did Garrett and Melissa say? I asked. That's just it. They're making excuses, saying he's under stress from his advanced classes, blaming peer pressure. Then Garrett had the nerve to say, the holiday was ruined because you weren't here, as if that had anything to do with his son stealing from his own family members. I could hear raised voices in the background on Susan's end. Is that Dad? Yes, Susan said grimly. He and your mother have been arguing for the last hour. Linda keeps defending Garrett and Jack. But Frank, well, I think he's finally seeing the situation clearly, especially after what happened with Uncle Pete. What happened with Uncle Pete? I felt a chill of concern. Pete was in his 70s and had a heart condition. Pete's heart medication was missing from his overnight bag. 2 pills. We've been turning the house upside down looking for them. Pete's really upset. He needs those pills on a strict schedule. Is he okay for now? Your dad drove to an emergency pharmacy that's open on Christmas to get a replacement, but it was really scary for a while. That's when things really exploded. Did you listen to the entire voicemail from your father? I asked. Yes, I said. I heard what he said at 47 seconds. Susan made a noise that sounded like satisfaction. Good. He meant it, Hilton. I've known Frank for 30 years, and I've never seen him like this. It's like scales have fallen from his eyes. He kept saying, we've been wrong about the boys all along, and Hilton and Jessica were right about structure and consequences. The conversation continued with Susan filling in more details. Apparently, my mother had known about Jack stealing for months. My nephew had been caught taking money from her purse back in October, but she'd kept it quiet, giving him a stern talking to, but nothing more. No consequences, no therapy, no mention to anyone else in the family. Linda just didn't want to believe her golden grandchild could have real problems, Susan explained. So, she covered for him. And now it's escalated. Just then, I heard a commotion in the background. Susan's voice became muffled, then returned. I have to go. Garrett and Melissa are leaving with the kids. They're furious that anyone would suggest Jack needs professional help. Your mother is crying. It's a complete mess. After we hung up, I stood on the porch for several minutes, processing everything. The day had taken such a bizarre turn that I almost felt like laughing, though there was nothing funny about the situation. When I went back inside, Jessica was waiting expectantly. I filled her in on everything Susan had told me. So, let me get this straight, Jessica said slowly. Our boys get excluded for being disruptive, which they haven't been in months, by the way, while Jack has been stealing from family members and getting away with it, apparently. And now your parents are having some kind of revelation about parenting because of it. That's what it sounds like. Jessica crossed her arms. And what exactly are we supposed to do with this information? Rush over there to comfort them after they uninvited their own grandchildren from Christmas? I understood her anger. I felt it too. But I also felt something else. A strange sense of validation after years of judgment and criticism. I don't know what we're supposed to do, I admitted. But I know what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to drop everything and run to fix their Christmas after they ruined ours. Jessica nodded approvingly. Good. They need to sit with this feeling for a while. More texts were coming in. Amy sent a photo she'd surreptitiously taken of my mother sitting alone in the kitchen, looking utterly defeated. Uncle Pete was apparently resting comfortably now that his medication had been replaced. Garrett and his family had indeed left in a huff, with Jack unapologetic and my brother blaming everyone but himself for the situation. Then came the most revealing text of all, again from Amy. Found something you should know about. The Christmas cards from your boys. They were hidden in a drawer, unopened. Your mom put them there when they arrived. I opened them. They're beautiful. Taking pictures to show you. Moments later, my phone displayed images of the cards Tyler and Logan had made. Colorful, heartfelt creations with careful messages written in their still-developing handwriting. Merry Christmas, Grandma and Grandpa. We love you. With drawings of our whole family together. Cards that my parents couldn't even be bothered to open. The knowledge stung worse than the uninvitation. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment decision. This was a calculated dismissal of my children that had happened weeks ago. Jessica saw the pictures over my shoulder and made a small, hurt sound. That's it, she said quietly. That's absolutely it. My phone continued to buzz with calls from my parents, but I didn't answer. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't rushing to smooth things over, to be the peacemaker, to accommodate their feelings at the expense of my own family's well-being. Christmas Day continued at our house. We built blanket forts in the living room. We watched holiday movies. We baked cookies and played with new toys. The boys had a wonderful day, blissfully unaware of the family drama unfolding 3 hours away. By evening, my parents had called 17 more times. The final call of the night came at 9:45 after the boys were in bed. It was my father again, leaving another voicemail that sounded both desperate and resigned. Hilton, I understand why you're not answering. I would do the same in your position. But when you're ready to talk, please call your mother and I. We have a lot to make up for. To you, to Jessica, and especially to those boys. I sat on the edge of our bed, phone in hand, Jessica beside me. What are you thinking? She asked softly. I'm thinking it's time for some boundaries, I replied. Real ones, not just temporary distance. If they want a relationship with us, with the boys, things need to change fundamentally. Jessica took my hand. I'm with you. Whatever you decide, but don't make any decisions tonight. Let's enjoy the rest of our Christmas and deal with this tomorrow. She was right, as usual. I put the phone away and held my wife close, grateful for the family we'd built together, a family based on acceptance and support rather than impossible expectations. Outside our window, snow began to fall, covering our little corner of Portland in a blanket of white. Tomorrow would bring difficult conversations and hard choices. But tonight, in this moment, we had peace. I slept poorly that night, my mind replaying the events of the day. When I checked my phone at 6 in the morning, I had 7 new text messages, all from various family members. The family crisis was still unfolding, spilling over into the day after Christmas. From Amy, your dad spent an hour looking at old photo albums last night after everyone left. He seemed really upset. From Uncle Pete, your parents owe you an apology, son. We all saw how they've been treating your family. It's not right. From my cousin Travis, just wanted to say I've always thought your kids were great. This whole situation is messed up. Then a longer message from Aunt Susan. Linda and Frank had a huge fight after everyone left. I stayed over to make sure they were okay. Frank slept in the guest room. He keeps saying they've made terrible mistakes with you and the boys. I think he's really having a reckoning. Jessica found me at the kitchen table scrolling through the messages. She poured coffee for both of us and sat down. What's the latest from the family soap opera? I showed her the texts. Apparently, my dad's having some kind of crisis of conscience. Good, Jessica said firmly. It's about time. The boys came downstairs soon after, excited to play with their Christmas presents. I pushed the family drama aside and focused on them, helping Tyler set up his new science kit, while Jessica and Logan worked on a complex Lego set. It was a peaceful morning, the kind of family time I cherished. Around 10 o'clock, my phone rang again. It was Amy. I thought you should know, she said without preamble. I found something while helping clean up yesterday. Her voice was tense with controlled anger. I was looking for a place to store some leftovers, and I opened your mom's photo cabinet. Okay. I wasn't sure where this was going. Hilton, there are no photos of your boys in the family albums. None. There are entire albums dedicated to Jack, Emma, and Ben. Every school photo, every Christmas, every birthday. But Tyler and Logan? They're just absent. I checked. I went through everything while your mom was upstairs. The only pictures of your sons are in a manila envelope labeled Hilton's family. Not even in an album, Hilton. Just loose photos in an envelope shoved in the back of the cabinet. I felt a cold sensation spreading through my chest. Maybe they're in a different album? Are you still there? Amy asked after my long silence. Yeah, I managed. Thanks for telling me. You deserve to know. And Hilton, everyone's on your side in this. Everyone except Garrett, obviously. After hanging up, I sat motionless for several minutes, processing this new information. Jessica found me still at the kitchen table, my coffee long gone cold. What happened now? She asked. When I told her about the photos, her eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of pure, righteous anger. How dare she? How dare she erase our children like they're some kind of family embarrassment? I'd never seen Jessica so angry. In all our years together, through all the challenges with the boy's diagnosis, through all the subtle and not so subtle criticism from my parents, she'd maintained her composure. But this deliberate exclusion of our children from family history had broken something open. We need to make some decisions, she said, sitting across from me. This can't continue. Your parents can't be allowed to make our children feel like they're defective or unwanted. I nodded, my mind finally clear after a night of confusion. You're right. We need boundaries, real ones, not just temporary distance. We spent the next hour talking through options while the boys played upstairs. Complete cutoff from my parents? Limited, supervised visits? Family therapy as a requirement for continued contact? Each possibility had its merits and drawbacks. In the midst of our discussion, my phone rang again. This time it was my father. "Are you going to answer?" Jessica asked. I hesitated, then nodded. "I think it's time." My father's voice sounded rough, as if he hadn't slept either. "Hilton, thank you for picking up." "What do you want, Dad?" I kept my tone neutral. "We need to talk in person about yesterday, about everything. I'm not bringing my family to Seattle after what happened." "I understand that. I was thinking maybe just you and me. We could meet halfway. That diner in Portland you like? The one by the river." The suggestion surprised me. My father rarely left Seattle, and he'd certainly never suggested meeting me on my turf. "When?" "Tomorrow. I can drive down in the morning." I glanced at Jessica, who was listening intently. She nodded slightly. "Fine. Tomorrow at 11. But just so we're clear, this isn't me rushing in to smooth things over. This is you explaining yourself." "That's fair," he said quietly. "More than fair." After I hung up, Jessica studied my face. "Are you okay with this?" "I think so. I need to hear what he has to say, but I'm not making any promises on behalf of our family. Whatever relationship they have with the boys going forward has to be earned." "Absolutely," Jessica agreed. "And it starts with a genuine acknowledgement of how they've treated them, treated all of us." Throughout the day, more information trickled in through texts. Uncle Pete had apparently given my parents a stern lecture about family acceptance before leaving. Garrett was refusing to speak to anyone, including our parents, and was denying that Jack had any real problems. My mother had spent most of the day crying, but was still defending her treatment of the twins, insisting she'd only been trying to maintain standards. By evening, I drafted a lengthy email to my parents outlining years of hurtful comparisons and double standards. It wasn't accusatory or angry, just a straightforward accounting of how their behavior had affected our family, particularly the boys. I didn't send it yet, wanting to wait until after my conversation with my father. But having it written out helped clarify my thoughts. That night, as Jessica and I got ready for bed, she asked, "What do you hope comes out of tomorrow's meeting?" I considered the question carefully. Honestly, I'm not sure. Part of me wants to hear a genuine apology, but more than that, I want to understand why. Why have they been so determined to see our kids as problems rather than people? What is it about having grandchildren who are different that threatens them so much? Jessica nodded thoughtfully. "And if you get answers to those questions, what then? Then we decide together what kind of relationship we want our family to have with them going forward, if any." She kissed me softly. "I trust your judgment. Just remember, you and the boys deserve to be treated with respect and love. Nothing less is acceptable." As I tried to fall asleep, I found myself thinking about tomorrow's meeting with a mixture of dread and hope. For the first time in my adult life, I was going into a conversation with my father without any intention of compromising, accommodating, or peacemaking. Tomorrow, he would hear me, really hear me, or our relationship would fundamentally change. It was terrifying. It was necessary. It was long overdue. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Jessica helped me prepare for the meeting with my father, role-playing potential scenarios and reminding me of points I wanted to make. The boys were spending the day with Jessica's sister and her family, a post-Christmas tradition they looked forward to each year. This gave me the space to focus entirely on the conversation ahead. I arrived at the Riverside Diner 20 minutes early, choosing a booth in the back corner for privacy. The place was nearly empty, typical for the day after Christmas. I ordered coffee and waited, reviewing mental notes and trying to stay calm. My father arrived precisely at 11 o'clock, punctual as always. He looked older than he had at Thanksgiving just a month ago, with new lines around his eyes and mouth. He spotted me immediately but hesitated at the entrance, as if unsure of his welcome. Finally, he approached the booth and sat down across from me. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," he said formally. The waitress came by with coffee for him and refills for me. We ordered. Nothing else, both too tense for food. Once we were alone, an uncomfortable silence stretched between us. I decided before arriving that I wouldn't speak first. This meeting was his idea. Let him begin the conversation he claimed was so important. Finally, he cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology, Hilton. A significant one. What your mother and I did on Christmas morning was inexcusable. Uninviting your family at the last minute, On Christmas, of all days. He shook his head. There's no justification for it. No, I agreed coolly. There isn't. He fidgeted with his coffee cup, uncharacteristically nervous. My father had always been a confident man, sometimes to the point of arrogance. Seeing him unsure was strange. But it wasn't just Christmas, I continued. It's been years, Dad. Years of treating Tyler and Logan like they're somehow defective. Years of comparing them to Garrett's kids and finding them wanting. Years of making me and Jessica feel like we're failing as parents because our children happen to have ADHD. He flinched slightly at my direct words, but didn't deny them. You're right. It hasn't been fair to any of you. Why? I asked the question that had kept me awake. Why has it been so important to you and Mom to have perfect grandchildren? Why couldn't you accept Tyler and Logan for who they are? My father stared into his coffee for a long moment before answering. It's complicated, he began, then stopped himself. No, that's a cop-out. The truth is, your mother and I were scared. Scared of 7-year-old boys? Not of them. For them, he sighed heavily. My brother, your Uncle Richard, had undiagnosed learning disabilities. Back in the 50s, they didn't have names for those things. They just called kids like him problem children or slow. My parents were hard on him, thinking they could discipline his difficulties away. It destroyed him, Hilton. He dropped out of high school, got into drugs, ended up in prison. I was stunned. I'd never known my uncle well. He died of an overdose when I was in college. The family rarely spoke of him. When the boys were diagnosed, my father continued. It brought back all those old fears. Your mother especially. She was terrified they'd follow the same path as Richard. Instead of supporting you and learning about ADHD, we fell back on the same misguided thinking my parents had. That strict discipline and high standards would somehow fix the problem. It wasn't an excuse, but it was at least an explanation. A window into their thinking that I'd never had before. That still doesn't explain the favoritism, I pointed out. The way you and Mom have practically worshipped Garrett's kids while ignoring mine. My father's face flushed with shame. That's the part I'm not proud of. Garrett's been having problems for years. Financial troubles, marriage issues. Your mother and I have been helping him quite substantially. The perfect family image he projects, it's a facade. This was news to me. Garrett had always seemed so successful, so put together. What kind of problems? He's been in and out of jobs for the past 3 years. They're underwater on their mortgage. Melissa threatened divorce last year. And Jack. He paused. Jack's behavior issues go well beyond what happened on Christmas. The stealing has been going on for over a year. I sat back, processing this information. And you and Mom kept all this secret? What? Pride mostly. Garrett insisted on maintaining appearances. And your mother? Well, you know how important family image is to her. So, we compensated, spoiled the grandchildren, made excuses for Garrett, pretended everything was fine, while simultaneously holding my family to impossible standards. I added. Yes, my father met my eyes directly for the first time. It was wrong, Hilton. Deeply wrong. We've been unfair to you, to Jessica, and especially to Tyler and Logan. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to a photo, then turned it so I could see. It was a picture of the handmade Christmas cards the boys had made, now opened and displayed prominently on my parents' mantel. Susan made us open them after you refused to answer our calls. They're beautiful, Hilton. The boys put so much love into them, and we almost missed it because of our own prejudice. I felt a lump forming in my throat, but swallowed it down. A few displayed Christmas cards didn't erase years of hurtful behavior. Dad, I appreciate that you're having this revelation now, but you need to understand something. I can't just forgive and forget. This isn't about me. It's about my children. They deserve grandparents who value them, who see their strengths, who don't make them feel like they're broken. I know, he said softly. I know we have to earn back your trust and theirs. So what are you proposing? I asked. Because if you're hoping we'll all just move past this and go back to normal, that's not going to happen. My father straightened his shoulders, suddenly looking more like himself. I have some ideas, actually. First, your mother and I would like to learn more about ADHD. There are educational programs for families, aren't there? We want to attend those. I nodded, surprised by this initiative. There are. The Children's Hospital runs a grandparents' workshop specifically for this purpose. Good. We'll sign up. Second, we'd like to start having one-on-one time with the boys, not to change them, but to get to know them better on their terms. activities they enjoy, with plenty of movement breaks, and whatever accommodations they need. He continued, outlining a thoughtful plan that showed he'd given this serious consideration. He even suggested family therapy, something I never thought I'd hear from Frank Walker, who viewed therapy as something only for weak people. Your mother is resistant to the therapy idea, he admitted. But I'm working on her. What happened with Jack has shaken her deeply. She's beginning to realize that her perfect grandchildren aren't so perfect, and that maybe she's been focusing on the wrong things all along. And Garrett? I asked, where does he stand in all this? My father's expression darkened. Garrett is not handling this well. He's refusing to get Jack help, insisting it was just a one-time mistake. He's angry at us for, as he puts it, turning against him. This explained the continued family chaos that Susan and Amy had been texting about. Garrett had always been the golden child, immune from criticism. Having that shield removed must be disorienting for him. That's not your problem to solve, I said firmly. Your focus needs to be on repairing your relationship with my family. You're right, my father agreed. And that's what I want to do, if you'll give us the chance. I considered everything he'd said. The explanation about Uncle Richard, the revelation about Garrett's struggles, the concrete steps he was proposing to make amends. It was more accountability than I'd ever seen from my father. It was a start. I need to discuss this with Jessica, I said finally. We'll decide together what happens next, but I want to be very clear. Any relationship you have with Tyler and Logan going forward will have conditions. Respect for who they are, no comparisons to their cousins, no criticism disguised as concern. And if there's even a hint of the old behavior, we're done. My father nodded solemnly. I understand. And Hilton, I am truly sorry, not just for Christmas, but for all of it. You deserved better from us. Your boys deserved better. As we parted ways outside the diner, my father did something unexpected. He hugged me. Not the brief, awkward embrace we typically shared at family gatherings, but a real hug, tight and meaningful. Then he got in his car for the 3-hour drive back to Seattle, leaving me with much to think about. On the drive home, I called Jessica and briefed her on the conversation. She was cautiously optimistic, but firm in her resolve that any reconciliation would be on our terms, with clear boundaries. We should invite them to our house, she suggested. Let them see the boys in their own environment, where they're comfortable and confident. If they're serious about making changes, they'll accept. It was a good idea, a first step toward what might be a new kind of relationship with my parents, one based on respect rather than judgment, acceptance rather than criticism. That evening, I sent my parents an email. I didn't use the draft I'd written the night before, full of accumulated grievances, but a new one. It acknowledged my father's apology and outlined our conditions for moving forward. I invited them to visit us in Portland the following weekend, to spend time with the boys on their turf, and to begin the process of getting to know their grandsons for who they really were. The response came within the hour. My mother and father both agreeing to our terms and expressing gratitude for the opportunity. For the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope that my parents might actually become the grandparents Tyler and Logan deserved. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Years of hurt feelings and established patterns couldn't be undone in a single conversation or visit, but it was a beginning. 3 days later, my parents arrived at our house in Portland. They'd taken a hotel room nearby rather than staying with us. A small but significant acknowledgement that we needed space and that this visit was on our terms. Jessica had prepared the boys, explaining in age-appropriate terms that Grandma and Grandpa wanted to learn more about the things they enjoyed. She'd been careful not to make promises about changed behavior, knowing that would take time to prove. The boys were excited nonetheless, particularly when I mentioned they could show off their new Christmas presents. My parents arrived precisely at 10 o'clock, bearing thoughtfully chosen gifts. Not the educational toys they typically selected, but items aligned with the boys' actual interests. Remote-controlled cars for Logan, who loved anything with wheels. A dinosaur excavation kit for Tyler, who'd been obsessed with paleontology since watching a documentary series last summer. My mother looked nervous, clutching her purse tightly as she entered our home. My father's hand rested supportively on her back, guiding her forward. It was a reversal of their usual dynamic, where she led and he followed in social situations. "Hello, boys," my mother said, her voice slightly higher than normal. "We've brought some presents we thought you might like." Tyler approached cautiously, always the more reserved of the twins. Is it because it's still Christmas? It's because we missed seeing you on Christmas Day, my father answered, crouching down to the boy's level, something I'd never seen him do before. And we wanted to make up for that. Logan, always more direct, asked, were we too noisy for Christmas dinner? Mom said you had a lot of people over. Jessica and I exchanged alarmed glances. Despite our efforts to protect them from the truth, the boys had drawn their own conclusions about the missed family gathering. Before we could intervene, my mother surprised me by kneeling down, despite her arthritic knees, to look Logan in the eyes. No, sweetheart. You weren't too noisy. Grandpa and I made a mistake. We've been making a lot of mistakes, actually, but we're going to try to do better. It was the most honest I'd ever heard my mother be with the children. Logan seemed satisfied with this answer and eagerly accepted his gift. Tyler followed suit, his initial weariness giving way to excitement when he saw the dinosaur kit. The morning progressed more smoothly than I'd dared hope. The boys showed my parents their Christmas presents, their bedrooms, their art projects from school. My father asked thoughtful questions about their interests. My mother made a visible effort to engage with their energy rather than trying to contain it. When Tyler needed a movement break, bouncing on his therapy ball while explaining dinosaur facts, my parents didn't exchange disapproving glances as they would have in the past. When Logan's enthusiasm led him to interrupt the conversation, my mother gently redirected him without criticism. They were trying. It was obvious, sometimes awkward, but genuine. Around noon, Jessica suggested the boys show my father the backyard fort they'd been building, giving me a meaningful look that said she'd handle lunch preparations with my mother. It was time for the women to have their own conversation. Outside, my father admired the boys' construction project, offering suggestions and helping them secure a loose board. I watched from the patio, seeing a version of my father I'd rarely witnessed, patient, engaged, willing to get his hands dirty. They're remarkable boys, he said when the twins ran inside to fetch additional materials. So bright, so full of ideas. I've been missing out, haven't I? Yes, I said simply. You have. I want to make up for that, Hilton. I know it won't happen overnight, but I'm committed to being a better grandfather. Inside, I could see Jessica and my mother through the kitchen window. They were standing close together, my mother wiping tears from her eyes as Jessica spoke intently. Whatever reckoning was happening in there, it appeared to be as necessary and overdue as my conversations with my father. After lunch, while the boys were occupied with their new toys, the four adults sat down in the living room for the difficult conversation we'd been building toward all day. We need to talk about why things got to this point, I began. Not just Christmas, but the years of differential treatment between our kids and Garrett's. My mother clasped her hands tightly in her lap. I know you think I've favored Garrett's children. Mom, I interrupted gently but firmly. It's not what I think, it's what you've done. The photo albums Amy found with no pictures of the twins, the unopened Christmas cards, the different gift standards. These aren't matters of perception. Her shoulders slumped. You're right. I've been unfair. But you have to understand, Hilton, it wasn't because I love them any less. Then why? Jessica asked, her voice controlled, but edged with the hurt of years of watching her children be marginalized. My mother looked to my father, who nodded encouragingly. When the boys were diagnosed with ADHD, she began slowly. It scared me. My brother, your Uncle Richard. Dad told me about him, I said. But fear doesn't explain everything, Mom. Fear doesn't explain why Jack, Emma, and Ben have been treated like royalty, while Tyler and Logan have been treated like problems to be managed. My father cleared his throat. I told Hilton about Garrett's situation. My mother's head snapped up. Frank, we agreed. They deserve the truth, Linda. All of it. My mother fell silent, then nodded reluctantly. Garrett's family has been struggling for years, she admitted. Financially, emotionally. Jack's behavior problems started long before the stealing incident. He's been acting out at school, lying compulsively. Melissa has threatened divorce twice. And you've been covering for them, Jessica said, financially and otherwise. Yes, my mother acknowledged. We've been helping with their mortgage, with private school tuition. We've been compensating, trying to give those children stability through material things, through special treatment, while simultaneously holding Tyler and Logan to an impossible standard. It was wrong, my mother said quietly. I see that now. We've been enabling Garrett's problems while punishing you for being honest about yours. It's no wonder things came to a breaking point. What changed? Jessica asked. Why this sudden realization now? My parents exchanged glances. When Jack stole Uncle Pete's heart medication, my father explained. It was like a curtain being lifted. Pete could have died. And there was Garrett, still making excuses, still refusing to get his son help. Meanwhile, you two have been doing everything right with the twins. Therapy, proper support, advocating for them at school. We've been so focused on appearance, my mother added. The appearance of perfect grandchildren, the appearance of a successful older son. We lost sight of what really matters. And what's that? I asked. Love, she said simply. Real love, not conditional approval. Seeing our grandchildren for who they are, not who we want them to be. It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had as a family. Painful truths were acknowledged. Years of hurt feelings were aired. My parents admitted their favoritism, their fear-based parenting, their enabling of Garrett's dysfunctional behavior. What about Garrett? I asked eventually. Where does he stand in all this? My parents shared another look. He's not speaking to us, my father said. He's angry that we're insisting Jack get professional help as a condition of further financial support. He'll come around, my mother added, though she didn't sound convinced. Eventually, by the time the conversation ended, all four of us were emotionally drained, but clearer than we'd ever been. My parents didn't just apologize. They committed to specific actions. They would attend the grandparents' ADHD education program at Children's Hospital. They would respect our parenting decisions. They would make a conscious effort to treat all their grandchildren with equal affection and attention. And perhaps most importantly, they would maintain these new boundaries with Garrett as well, no longer enabling his denial about Jack's problems. As they prepared to leave, my mother hugged the boys goodbye. Real hugs, not the stiff, obligatory embraces of the past. We'll see you soon, she promised. Maybe you can come visit us in Seattle next month. We could go to that dinosaur exhibit at the Science Center. Tyler's face lit up. Really? With the full T-Rex skeleton? Really, she confirmed. I've already looked into tickets. It was a small thing, but significant. My mother making plans that centered the boys' interests rather than her expectations. After my parents left, Jessica and I sat in stunned silence for several minutes. That was, she began. Intense, I finished. But good, I think. Real. Do you think they'll follow through? Or is this just temporary guilt over the Christmas disaster? I considered the question carefully. I think they mean it. Whether they can maintain it, especially with Garrett pressuring them to go back to the old dynamic, that remains to be seen. But today felt different. It did, Jessica agreed. Your mom with the boys. I've never seen her that attentive, that engaged. We'll proceed carefully, I said. Trust, but verify. The boys come first. Always. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Always. That night, after the boys were asleep, I found myself looking through our family photo albums. Unlike my mother's collection, ours were full of Tyler and Logan in all their energetic, sometimes chaotic glory. Blurry action shots, silly faces, occasional meltdowns captured alongside the perfect moments. The real story of our family, not an edited highlight reel. I selected a dozen of my favorite photos spanning the past 7 years and made copies. The next morning, I mailed them to my parents with a simple note. For your albums. The real story of your grandsons. It was a peace offering, but also a statement. If they truly wanted to be part of our lives, they needed to embrace the whole truth of who we were as a family. Beautiful, messy, imperfect, real. 1 month after the Christmas debacle, we hosted a delayed holiday gathering at our home in Portland. It was my idea, a do-over of sorts, but on our terms, in our space, where the boys felt comfortable and confident. My parents arrived early to help set up. My father assembling an extra table extension, while my mother arranged nameplates she'd carefully crafted for each family member, including specially decorated ones for Tyler and Logan featuring dinosaurs and race cars, reflecting their individual interests. I hope these are okay, she said somewhat nervously, showing me the nameplates. I looked at pictures from their birthday party to see what themes they like. This small effort, my mother actually paying attention to the boys' preferences, spoke volumes about her commitment to change. The twins were initially wary around their grandparents, the memory of the canceled Christmas visit still fresh. But my father had brought his old collection of geology specimens, knowing Tyler's interest in dinosaurs extended to rocks and minerals. Soon they were sprawled on the living room floor, examining quartz crystals and fool's gold with a child-sized microscope my father had also brought. Did you know? I overheard my father telling the boys that your dad used to collect rocks when he was about your age. He had quite the collection. You did? Tyler looked up at me with newfound interest. I'd forgotten all about that, I admitted. It was before I got into sports. I kept some of your best specimens, my father said. They're in the basement. Next time you visit, we'll dig them out. It was the first time he'd spoken about my childhood interests with warmth rather than dismissal. As a teenager, I'd abandoned rock collecting for basketball, partly because my father had made it clear which hobby he considered more worthwhile for a young man. This acknowledgement of my earlier passion felt like the healing of an old wound I hadn't realized still hurt. Aunt Susan and Uncle Pete arrived next, bearing gifts for the delayed Christmas exchange. Susan immediately engaged Logan in animated conversation about his new remote control cars while Pete, now recovered from his heart medication scare, showed genuine interest in the boys' Christmas morning photos. The most tense moment came when Garrett and his family arrived. I hadn't been sure they would accept the invitation given the ongoing conflict with our parents, but they'd come, though Garrett's tight expression suggested it wasn't entirely voluntary. Jack, now 12, seemed subdued compared to previous family gatherings. He stuck close to his mother, avoiding eye contact with Uncle Pete and others he'd stolen from. Emma and Ben were their usual well-behaved selves, though I noticed Emma watching the adults wearily, picking up on the underlying tension. My mother had prepared herself for this moment, consulting with a family therapist on how to navigate the situation. When Jack mumbled a clearly rehearsed apology to Uncle Pete, she neither rushed to minimize his actions nor piled on additional shame. "Thank you for apologizing, Jack," she said simply. "That took courage. Now, would you like to help me arrange the appetizers?" Offering him a task was her way of showing that while his actions had consequences, he wasn't defined by his mistakes. It was exactly the balanced approach Jessica and I tried to use with our own boys. Garrett, watching this interaction, seemed both relieved and unsettled. The script had changed. His son wasn't being excused, but he wasn't being ostracized either. The familiar family dynamic of glossing over difficult truths had been replaced with something new: accountability paired with compassion. Lunch was surprisingly pleasant. The boys, excited to play host in their own home, proudly showed their cousins their toys and games. My father engaged Jack in conversation about a science project, finding points of genuine connection beyond the recent troubles. My mother made a visible effort to give equal attention to all 5 grandchildren, no longer hovering exclusively around Garrett's family. After dessert, while the children played in the backyard under Jessica's supervision, I found myself alone with Garrett in the kitchen, both of us on dish duty. "So," he said, aggressively scrubbing a casserole dish, "you've turned Mom and Dad completely around, huh?" I measured my response carefully. That's not how I see it. They've recognized some patterns that weren't healthy for anyone, including your family. "Jack made a mistake," Garrett said defensively. "Kids make mistakes." "They do," I agreed. "Tyler and Logan make them all the time. The difference is they've never been allowed to make them without criticism, while Jack's been allowed to make them without consequences." Garrett's scrubbing intensified. "You have no idea what my family's been going through." "Actually, I do. Mom and Dad told me everything, Garrett. About your job issues, the financial problems, the struggles with Jack's behavior. Why didn't you just talk to me? I'm your brother. I would have helped if I could." He set the dish down, his shoulders slumping. "And admit that my perfect life isn't so perfect? That maybe your kids aren't the only ones with problems? That would have ruined everything." "What?" "Everything. The whole dynamic. You're the screw-up with the difficult kids. I'm the successful one with the perfect family. That's how it's always been." The blunt assessment stung, but it wasn't inaccurate. "And how's that working out for everyone?" I asked quietly. "Your son is stealing. The twins have been treated like second-class grandchildren, and Mom and Dad have been enabling problems instead of helping solve them." Garrett was silent for a long moment. "Jack's seeing a counselor now," he finally said. "Twice a week. It was part of Mom and Dad's conditions for continuing to help with the kids' school tuition." "That's good," I said sincerely. "How's it going?" "It's hard. He's angry. Melissa and I are." He trailed off, then admitted, "We're in couples therapy, too. Things haven't been good for a while." It was more vulnerability than Garrett had shown in years. "I'm sorry you've been going through all that alone," I told him. "Truly. Mom says you and Jessica should write a parenting book," he said with a weak attempt at humor. "Apparently, you've been doing everything right while we've been doing everything wrong." "That's not true. We've just been more open about our challenges. And believe me, we make plenty of mistakes." "But your kids are happy," Garrett observed. "Despite the ADHD, despite everything, they're genuinely happy kids." Jack hasn't been happy in years. It was a painful admission from a father, and I felt a surge of compassion for my brother. He can be again, with the right support. We finished the dishes in a different kind of silence. Not tense, but thoughtful. Something had shifted between us. The first crack in a competitive dynamic that had defined our relationship since childhood. Later, as the gathering wound down, I observed my parents with new eyes. My father was on the floor playing a board game with all 5 grandchildren, making adjustments to accommodate Tyler's shorter attention span without calling attention to it. My mother was deep in conversation with Jessica about an ADHD parenting book they'd both apparently read, my mother asking thoughtful questions rather than offering unwanted advice. They weren't perfect. My mother still occasionally slipped into her old patterns, making a reflexive comparison between the cousins before catching herself. My father sometimes grew visibly tense when Logan's energy level peaked. But they were trying, really trying, and the effort itself was healing. 3 months later, at Easter, the change in family dynamics was even more noticeable. We gathered at my parents' house in Seattle, the twins excited rather than anxious about the visit. The dinosaur exhibit trip my mother had promised had been a success, with both boys returning with stories of how Grandma had known so many dinosaur facts. She'd clearly done her research, and how Grandpa had taken them for ice cream afterward. My parents' home had been subtly modified to be more accommodating to the twins' needs. A corner of the living room now featured a small trampoline and fidget toys. Photo albums on the coffee table now included equal representation of all 5 grandchildren. And most touchingly, the handmade Christmas cards from Tyler and Logan had been framed and hung in the hallway alongside similar artwork from Jack, Emma, and Ben. Garrett and his family seemed to be healing as well. Jack was more engaged, making eye contact, and even apologizing unprompted when he accidentally knocked over Ben's Easter basket. Melissa and Garrett sat together on the porch swing, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the children hunt for eggs in the backyard. "Your parents have been amazing," Jessica murmured to me as we watched the scene. "I never thought we'd get here." "Me neither," I admitted. "But I'm glad we did." The most powerful moment came that afternoon when my father gathered all 5 grandchildren for a special announcement. "Summer is coming," he told them, "and Grandma and I would like to teach all of you how to fish at the lake house." The lake house fishing lessons had been a sacred tradition reserved exclusively for Garrett's children in previous years. The twins' eyes widened at this unexpected inclusion. "Really?" Logan asked. "Even us. Especially you," my father said, ruffling his hair. "I hear you have excellent reflexes, which is perfect for catching fish." That evening, after everyone had gone home and the twins were asleep in the guest bedroom, I found myself alone with my father on the back deck. We sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the stars emerge in the clear spring sky. "I've been meaning to tell you," he said eventually. "I found that voicemail I left you on Christmas Day, the one where I said we'd been wrong about the boys all along." I nodded, remembering the 47-second mark that had changed everything. "I saved it," he continued, "as a reminder of how close we came to losing you and the boys forever, and of how important it is to see people for who they really are, not who we think they should be." "That's quite the philosophical insight from a retired engineer," I teased gently. He smiled. "Old dogs, new tricks." After a moment, he added more seriously, "I'm proud of you, Hilton, of the father you've become, the husband, the advocate for your children. It took a lot of courage to stand up to your mother and me, to set boundaries, to demand better for your family." "It wasn't easy," I admitted. "The right things rarely are." He looked out at the night sky. "I have regrets about how we treated the boys, about enabling Garrett's problems instead of helping him face them. But I'm grateful it's not too late to change." I thought about the journey of the past few months. The painful Christmas morning call that seemed like the end of something, but had actually been the beginning. The difficult conversations, the honest reckonings, the slow rebuilding of trust. It's never too late, I told my father. As long as we're willing to do the work. Later that night, I checked my phone and found a text message from my mother, sent from her bedroom down the hall. Thank you for giving us a second chance with the boys. They are perfect exactly as they are. We just needed to open our eyes to see it. Attached was a photo she'd taken that day. Tyler and Logan, faces painted like dinosaurs, roaring joyfully in my parents' backyard. Not posed, not perfect, but genuinely, beautifully themselves, and finally fully embraced for exactly who they were. The next morning, I listened to that Christmas Day voicemail one last time before deleting it. I no longer needed the evidence of my father's revelation. The proof was all around us, in the new family we were building together. One based on acceptance rather than expectations, on love rather than conditions. That Christmas morning call had seemed like rejection, but it had actually been the catalyst for profound change. Sometimes, I've reflected, the most painful moments in our lives become the doorways to the healing we never knew we needed. I've come to believe that family redemption is possible when we're brave enough to speak our truth, set our boundaries, and offer forgiveness to those willing to earn it. It's not about forgetting past hurts, but about creating new patterns that honor who we really are. Have you ever experienced a painful family situation that ultimately led to positive change? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that family healing is possible, even after the deepest hurts. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the calls we dread answering become the conversations that change everything.